Here.
Thank you.
I found the mithril hammer. Can your flames show me why my soul was denied death?
You are the victim of a blood sacrifice.
Can the curse be broken?
Destroy the Black Hand and his followers, and claim Mordor.
No men of Gondor will come to my aid.
You don't need them. Your power begets followers, willing or otherwise.
An orc army. How do I do this?
Your answers are in the fortress nearby, but what you seek may not be there for much longer.
Welcome all to another episode of Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor Lore. Now in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about whether or not Tolkien himself would probably be proud of the game that Monolith has created. And when looking at a game, especially a game from this particular universe, this particular Legendarium, a lot of people think that you just kind of look at the story to see if it kind of matches with the spirit and the feel of Middle-earth, but you also have to look at the gameplay. If you're looking at a game as a whole, story is only one aspect, graphics are another aspect, gameplay to me is the largest aspect. If a game's not fun, it can look pretty, it can have a good story, but if it's hard to play, you're not going to be happy with the game no matter what. So when you look at a Lord of the Rings game, in my mind, you inevitably have to see how this gameplay matches up with the established lore/canon of the world. We've already kind of talked about it a little bit with Talion being able to be resurrected by the spirit of his wraith, and how that as a gameplay device makes sense for the developers, but doesn't make sense from a lore standpoint, because even if a wraith is able to deny the call of Mondos and linger, and even, you know, be able to inhabit a body, which is what's kind of hinted at in Morgoth's Ring, this ability for the Wraith to be able to resurrect another creature doesn't make sense. But again, as a gameplay device, it's what works. This whole idea about being able to brand other orcs is something that kind of has me a little bit upset. Kind of makes me feel bad while I'm playing the game, and I think that's might be the idea. Even though these are Uruks that you're branding, you might not think you have any sympathy for them. It's not that I have sympathy for these Uruks that I'm branding. It's the whole idea of subjugating one's will to yours, lording over them, subduing them, and essentially, becoming a mini Melkor. This is exactly what Melkor himself wanted, and one of the things that kind of separates him from the other Ainur. It's written in the Silmarillion. This is a quote from the Ainulin Delay after the music of the Ainur has happened, and Ilúvatar is showing them the vision of what their minstrelsy has created, essentially. He has just shown them the vision of what will be the children of Ilúvatar, which are elves and men. Quote, "But when the Ainur had beheld this habitation in a vision, and had seen the children of Ilúvatar arise therein, that many of the most mighty among them bent all their thought and their desire towards that place. And of these Melkor was the chief, even as he was in the beginning the greatest of the Ainur who took part in the music. And he feigned, even to himself at first, that he desired to go thither and order all things for the good of the children of Ilúvatar, controlling the turmoils of the heat and of the cold that had come to pass through him. But he desired rather to subdue to his will both elves and men, envying the gifts which Ilúvatar promised to endow them. And he wished himself to have subjects and servants, and to be called Lord, and to be master over other wills. This whole idea of noble lordship, rightful lordship, and subjugation is a trend and a topic that you see weaved throughout Tolkien's Middle-earth. Melkor is set apart because while the other Ainur, who eventually go down into the circles of Arda, want to do things because they love the children and they want to learn more about the children, because in doing so they'll learn more about Ilúvatar, the one who created them. Melkor, on the other hand, he wants to subjugate them. He wants them to call him Lord. He wants them to essentially be his, and he preside over everything. And you see this recapitulated over and over and over again. The other biggest example is one of Morgoth's lieutenants, Sauron. The whole reason why the One Ring is evil is the whole reason why it's created. Sauron deceives Celebrimbor into creating the Rings of Power, and in doing so he is able to, because he had a hand in their creation, create the One Ring to subjugate and rule over all the other rings. Now, the 3 rings that the elves kept are different. Celebrimbor created those in secret, and Sauron never touched them, but they were still subject to the one. And, I mean, you have that entire ring verse that just reeks of this whole idea. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all in the darkness bind them. This idea that these evil creatures in Tolkien's Legendarium want to subjugate the will of others, regardless of who they are, is something that is Tolkien-esque. I mean, you find it all throughout his Legendarium, but you would never find a good character doing this. Tolkien has often been criticized about being very black and white in its good and evil presentation. You are either good or evil. There's not much gray. There are a couple examples of when something good turns out to be evil, and then you can have the argument whether or not that is a gray area or not. Feanor and his oath, the reasons why the oath was swore, not what happens after the oath, can be, considered kind of a gray area, because it was sworn with the intention to do justice to the death of his father and to essentially rid Arda of someone like Melkor. But through the oath, horrible things happened. You had the kinslaying, you had the burning of the ships of the Teleri, you had the subsequent kinslayings that happened afterwards because the oath drove them. Something very evil in that, but you can kind of think of Feanor and his sons really as gray characters. That's kind of what the developers are trying to set up here. Talion is neither purely good, but he's also not purely evil. It's kind of ironic that Celebrimbor kind of cautions Talion early on in the game that we cannot end up becoming that which we're trying to destroy. And I would say by being the proponent for this, because to his credit, Talion at first is not willingly wanting to do this. He thinks it's wrong, even if these are Uruks. He says that, it's one thing to kill the Uruks, it's another thing to control them completely. And Celebrimbor is a proponent of it. He says something to the effect that we must use the tools of the enemy against him if we're going to defeat him. And that, to me, is the very, essence of becoming that which you're trying to destroy. So, to get back to the original topic, though, would Tolkien be proud of the game that Monolith put out? I would have to say no, because this whole idea of one of the core tenets of the gameplay being able to essentially control Sauron's armies, and the way you're controlling them is by subjugating them to your will, and you're supposedly supposed to be a force for good in the game, it's something that I can't say for certain, because obviously, you know, the professor's no longer with us, but I have a very hard time thinking that, you know, the professor would think this to be a good thing. He probably would be as angry about this adaptation of his story as his son seems to be about every adaptation of his story. So I would caution before you start saying that, you know, this is a game that Tolkien himself would be proud of. I have a hard time believing that, and it's because of this major pillar of the gameplay. Resurrection by Wraith aside, this ability to subjugate and subdue, you know, even if they are Uruks to your will, you're still doing something that is in Tolkien's world intrinsically evil. Even if it is to try to achieve good ends, you still have to kind of step back and say, okay, this is still bad. This is still something that, as a gameplay device, is kind of cool, but as just a good versus evil device is something that you should want no part of. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Legendarium, like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Thanks again. Until next time, Namarie.